Welcome to the Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Juan, and we're back here going through our course, the Exodus story. We're going on to lecture number 6 today, Israel in the Wilderness.
One of the things that I've taken with me throughout this study of Exodus is Dr. Jackson's explanation of the meaning of Yahweh, what God's name means, and his translation of Yahweh being, I will be there, howsoever I will be there. I really love that explanation of God's name, and we're going to see throughout the rest of our Exodus account how that plays out, right, in the relationship between God and the Israelites, and we're going to see how that plays out in some very bumpy and rocky ways right off the bat, right, Juan?
What I like about this part of the story in Exodus is somewhat different. It's actually that it kind of makes me angry. And here's the reason why. You've seen the Israelites now, by this time, we're in chapters 15 through 19 in this part, and you've seen time and time again that God has provided for them. He has delivered them. He has showed them incredible miracles. And despite that, they continue to grumble and complain and be ready to betray God in a sense immediately. But then after I say that, I immediately think of myself saying the exact same thing, watching myself in the mirror. And that is just, that's how we all are. God provides for us constantly, and he takes care of us, and we continue to grumble. So I guess a little sympathy for the Israelites here is needed.
And it's a marvel. Throughout all of the failings of the Israelites, God remains there with them in his infinite mercy. We're going to see that play out in some very interesting and dramatic ways in episode 6. We hope you enjoy this lecture. We hope you enjoy all of our courses, and you can learn more and sign up for more at hillsdale.edu/course whenever you have the opportunity. If you do like working through classic works, if you do like working through classic books, I do want to recommend a course by one of Dr. Jackson's colleagues in our English department. It's called Dante's Divine Comedy. It's taught by one of my favorite professors, Dr. Steve Smith. He works through the 3 parts of the Divine Comedy, right? Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso, and explains the conversion of Dante and what that teaches us about how to live a good, fulfilled life, right, in communion with God. So I think that's a wonderful thing to do, and you can sign up for that today at hillsdale.edu/course.
And now let's turn to Dr. Jackson and episode 6, Israel in the Wilderness.
In our last lecture, we witnessed the Passover, the crossing of the Red Sea, the destruction of the Egyptians, preservation and deliverance of the Israelites. Before the Song of Victory in chapter 15, which I covered last time, I just want to go through that passage again because it's actually what precedes the wilderness narrative. And Israel saw Egypt dead on the shore of the sea, and Israel saw the great hand that the Lord had performed against Egypt. And the people feared the Lord, and they trusted in the Lord and in Moses, his servant. That is going to be how we now begin their time into the wilderness, because it goes from that line to the poem that we went through, the Song of Victory, to immediately chapter 15, verse 22, with Israel in the wilderness. The Passover is done. The deliverance is complete. Now they're in the wilderness. And what we're going to be reading today, we'll get up through chapter 19, is this is all, I think, it's all preparation for chapter 20, the giving of the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. This is going to be a test to see, can Israel obey God and his commandments? That becomes the question. He delivered you from Egypt. He gave you basic commands in order to leave Egypt. You followed them. Now you're in the wilderness. Now it's going to begin the relationship between God and Israel. There are going to be commandments. There are going to be teachings one has to follow. Chapter 15, verse 22. And Moses made the Israelites journey onward from the Sea of Reeds, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and did not find water. And they came to Marah, and could not drink water from Marah, for it was bitter. Therefore is its name called Marah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? And he cried out to the Lord. And the Lord showed him a tree, and he flung it into the water, and the water turned sweet. There did he set him a statute and law, and there did he test him. And he said, If you really heed the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes and hearken to his commands and keep all his statutes, all the sickness that I put upon Egypt, I will not put upon you, for I am the Lord your healer. Look at that language there. It turns out the entire time, Egypt was acting as a sort of model for Israel. Like, watch what the Egyptians are doing and not doing, Israel. Don't be like the Egyptians. Obey me. There will be statutes. Obey those things. This is going to be the testing of the wilderness. And look what he provides for them. He provides water for them. And I love the water imagery all throughout Exodus. What has water been? We saw it with Moses, right, on the Nile. And he's associated with water. Well, why? Well, then we saw it with the Sea of Reeds, the crushing of the Egyptians, the holding back the water, walking on dry land to give the Israelites life. Now what is it? The water is bitter. It's undrinkable. It's as if there's a life there, but we can't partake of it. It's almost a taste of death that they see here. So what does he do? He instructs Moses, this tree that he throws in, to make the water drinkable. God is there to save the Israelites. But now what he's saying is, I'm still here with you. Remember, that's the name of God. I will be there, howsoever I will be there, to give them life through this water. But now there are stipulations. And now here comes the testing in chapters 16 and 17 with this example. They're hungry. They need food. Now we're going to see certain testing with manna and obedience. Chapter 16, verse 2, and all the community of Israelites murmured against Moses and against Aaron in the wilderness. So notice they were murmuring before. They needed water. God provided. They murmur again, and it's like, okay, we're going to murmur. Are we going to be provided for again? And the Israelites said to them, would that we had died by the Lord's hand. What an almost perverse statement. Why? Because the Lord's hand is that which delivered them. Remember, it was the Pharaoh's hand versus the Lord's hand, and the Lord's hand is the one that delivered them, that saved them. Now they say, would that we died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, when we ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out to this wilderness to bring death by famine on this assembly. And the Lord said to Moses, look, I am about to rain down bread for you from the heavens, and the people shall go about and gather each day's share on that day, so that I may test them whether they will go by my teaching or not. So notice, the manna question is a question of life and death, of course. It's going to be a question of protection. But like much of Exodus, it's also going to be a test. It's a test of obedience. Can you obey? There's life, there's protection, but the other thing that goes along with it is there will be obedience. And Moses and Aaron with him said to the Israelites, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the Lord's glory as he hears your murmurings against the Lord. And as for us, what are we that you should murmur against us? What a beautiful statement. He says, here you are murmuring against God. Would that we died by God's hand. And he says, in the morning you're going to see the Lord's glory as he hears your murmurings against the Lord. He's saying you're not really murmuring against Moses and Aaron. You're murmuring against the Lord. And it turns out he hears you and he will respond to you. He's going to give you precisely what it is that you desire, which is life itself. But that has to come along with obedience. Where there's protection, there's obedience. That's what's going to come along with this. And it happened as Aaron was speaking to all of the community of the Israelites that they turned toward the wilderness, and look, the Lord's glory appeared in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, saying, I have heard the murmurings of the Israelites. Speak to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God. And it happened in the evening that the quail came up and covered the camp in the morning. And there was a layer of dew around the camp. And the layer of dew lifted, and look, on the surface of the wilderness, stuff fine, flaky, fine as frost on the ground. And the Israelites saw, and they said each to each other, Manhu, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Notice what's going on here. This is the anti-plague. You notice what God's just given to them? He sent down from the heavens what? The manna, the food that they can eat. It's supposed to resemble the plague episodes earlier in Exodus when God rains down plagues upon them. But now what's he raining down on them? Food. He's providing for them. He's giving them life. Provided, it's going to come out that they have to obey. First, he's showing them, I have heard your murmurings. Here's your food. To rain down. I call this kind of the anti-plague. And then look, he says, this is the thing that the Lord charged. Gather from each man according to what he must eat, an omer to a head, the number of persons among you, each man for those in his tent you shall take. And the Israelites did thus, and they gathered some more and some less, and they measured it by the omer. He who took more had no extra, and he who took less had no lack. Each according to what he must eat did they gather. And Moses said to them, let no man leave over from till morning. But they did not heed Moses, and some men left over from it till morning, and it bred worms and stank, and Moses was furious with them. I hope you can see what's going on here. They've created a plague for themselves. When they obey, here's food for them to provide them nourishment. Moses tells them they have to gather it, and what happens? It rots, but the most important thing, and it stank. That should remind you specifically of the first two plagues of Egypt, the Nile River and the frogs. They stank. And what produces this? What produces it is disobedience.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding, and we want you or your son or daughter to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
So now this is what they have to start learning here, is how to obey God in order to be sustained. And Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it. And on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none then. And it happened on the 7th day that some of the people went out to gather, and they found nothing. And the Lord said to Moses, how long do you refuse to keep my commands and my teachings? So notice what happens. When they obey, when they take the food in, it doesn't rot. In fact, it tells us, verse 23, what you bake, bake, and what you cook, cook, and whatever is left over, leave for yourself to be kept till morning. And they left it until morning, as Moses had charged, and it did not stink. Obey, everything works out. Disobey, and nothing works out. It's as if Israel creates a plague for itself. God gives them food, nourishment, sustenance, life itself through their obedience. But when they disobey, what does it do? It stinks like death. This is supposed to remind you of all of the plagues that we saw with Egypt. Obey the commandment, things go well. Disobey, and it's as if you're bringing the plagues on yourself. Notice here, we also have in verse 25, we have our first lesson in the Sabbath. Do you see what's going on here? When we get to the Decalogue, we're going to have a Sabbath commandment. But here, what's he training them to do? To follow the Sabbath commandment, even before they have a Sabbath commandment. And what's going on here is follow the Sabbath, which they don't do. And then what's going to happen? It won't go well for them. It will stink. This is all training for the 10 Commandments. This is all training for chapter 20. This is God with Israel in a relationship. And he's trying to get them to follow his ways. And of course, God sits there and he says, you refuse to keep my commands and my teachings. Keep these things and be well. And of course, the people continue to murmur. And here's this scene. I absolutely love it. Chapter 17, verse 3. Moses is getting rather afraid and maybe fed up with the people because of all of their murmurings. And look at what God does in response to Moses. And the people thirsted for water there. And the people murmured against Moses and said, "Why is it you brought us up from Egypt to bring death on me and my children and my livestock by thirst?" And Moses called out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with this people?" I love it. What shall I do with this people? Not what shall I do with my people? Not what shall I do with your people? What shall I do with this people? He wants to just keep distance from them. Yet a little more and they will stone me. Moses is going, get me out of this. What am I supposed to do? They're going to stone me. And you think God would say, "Oh, I'll protect you," or, "Hey, go and try this strategy here. Oh, send Aaron. That's a good idea. Just send Aaron." He doesn't do that. And the Lord said to Moses, "Pass before the people and take with you some of Israel's elders and the staff which you struck the Nile. Take in your hand and go." He makes Moses pass before the people that Moses is afraid to about to stone him. He's like, no, just go right in front of them. And not only that, take the elders, but also take the staff. And I think taking that staff is important. Taking that staff is the way in which, they fought off the Amalekites. It's the thing in which we see the parting of the Sea of Reeds. Now he's like, take that staff before you. It's as if he's asking Moses, walk the gauntlet, see what the people do to you. And he does. He says, "Look, I'm about to stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out from it, and the people will drink." And thus did Moses do before the eyes of Israel's elders. And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, testing and dispute, for the disputation of the Israelites. And for their testing the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord in our midst or not?" Look how God responds to all of this each time. He keeps giving the Israelites what they want. He knows that they're young. He knows that they're immature. They don't really know him. We have to keep that in mind. When we go back to the very beginning of Exodus, they don't know this God. They do now, and they know that he's the God who's more powerful than all the gods of Egypt. They know that. But the other thing that they're starting to understand is no matter how much they complain, this God provides for them, and he continues to provide for them. I think this is really important as they go through that wilderness, because what is it that they want to do? They want to go back to Egypt, but it's from Egypt that the Lord delivered them. Now it's time to serve the Lord. How do you serve Pharaoh? You serve Pharaoh through slavery, through crushing labor. That's how you serve Pharaoh, avodah. How do you serve God? You serve God, just follow his commandments. Just do what he asks of you. You follow him through obedience. And then we can ask, well, what happens when you disobey? Oh, he'll crush you. He'll destroy you. No, it turns out he feeds you and waters you. Why would you? So in some ways you could say, well, then why would I obey? Well, there may come a time when Elohim stands up. It will be the God of justice. What they're relying on right now in the wilderness is Hashem, the God of mercy, who's trying to train them as his children. I think this is really important. It's what a lot of the wilderness narrative is about here. And it's in chapter 19 where we start to see the real preparation for the giving of the 10 Commandments. On the third new moon of the Israelites going out from Egypt, on this day did they come to the wilderness of Sinai. And they journeyed onward from Rephidim, and they came to the wilderness of Sinai. And Israel camped there over against the mountain. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their cloaks, and they shall ready themselves for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down before the eyes of all the people on Mount Sinai. And you shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, watch yourselves not to go up on the mountain or to touch its edge. Whosoever touches the mountain is doomed to die. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or be shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. And when the ram's horn blasts long, they it is who will go up to the mountain." I love this line here. Whosoever touches the mountain is doomed to die. Does that sound familiar to you? It should. It's the commandment of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. It should sound very familiar to you. You would think, well, what does What does this mountain have to do with the knowledge of good and evil? This is where the Lord is going to settle. And in the Hebrew Bible, it's very, very clear. Those who are not prepared to even touch the ark, come into the temple, you risk your life. God will burn away whatever uncleanness that you have in your ill preparation for it. So this is a warning for the safety of the people. They aren't prepared for this. That Sinai is, in fact, the knowledge of good and evil one more time writ large, and now God is going to descend upon this. And it happened on the third day as it turned morning that there was thunder and lightning and a heavy cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the ram's horn very strong, and all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people toward God from the camp, and they stationed themselves at the bottom of the mountain, and Mount Sinai was all in smoke, because the Lord had come down on it in fire, which they should be ready for. Yes, in fire. This is what has been with them during the whole exit from Egypt itself. And its smoke went up like the smoke from a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And the Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the mountaintop, and the Lord called Moses to the mountaintop, and Moses went up. Just think about this. And Moses went up. This is going to be the place of God. No one else can touch the mountain, but Moses can ascend. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, warn the people, lest they break through to the Lord and see many of them perish. And the priests too, who come near to the Lord, shall consecrate themselves, lest the Lord burst forth against them." Consecrate. Create yourself clean. God will burn away all uncleanness. So one must prepare oneself for this. Consecrate. Prayers, fasting, purity. This is what it takes to approach the divine. And Moses said to the Lord, "The people will not be able to come up to the Mount Sinai, for you yourself warned us, saying, 'Set bounds to the mountain and consecrate it.'" Oh, Moses is so cute here, isn't he? So cute. What do you mean the Israelites won't listen to you? Like, what makes you think they aren't going to listen to you? You told us very clearly, don't come near the mountain. This shouldn't be a problem. It's as if Moses isn't even paying attention to what the Israelites are doing. Look at what God says in response to it. And the Lord said to him, "Go down, and you shall come up, you and Aaron with you, and the priests and the people shall not break through to go up to the Lord, lest he burst forth against them." And Moses went down to the people and said it to them. In other words, God is telling Moses, trust me on this one. They don't understand. And I really have no desire to see them, a good number of them, get wiped out by going up to the mountain. And in fact, what will we learn once we get to chapter 32? We'll learn that in fact they are quite anxious about where Moses is. This is a fear. But I just love the fact here in this final scene that Moses actually has great faith in the people of Israel, even though they murmur, even though he knows that they disobey. And God corrects him. And God says, nevertheless, go to them. In other words, God is willing to just stand there and make sure that the Israelites are protected. Not in this way, it's not protected from the wrath of God, as if God is going to stand up there and just unleash his anger upon them. Rather, it's the glory of God which will burn away anything that's impure. What does that mean to be impure? Disobedient, not consecrated, not praying, not fasting. Everything which one must do to prepare oneself to meet God, not face to face, but to go and meet him. God knows they aren't prepared for this. And he needs Moses to make sure they are prepared for it, because we know what's going to come eventually once Moses is up there, whenever they decide to turn away and make the golden calf. So we've set everything up for ourselves for chapter 20. That's all we're going to do in our lecture next time, is we're just going to cover the 10 Commandments, the Decalogue, to work through what I think is just a beautiful logic of the Decalogue that begins in anti-idolatry and ends in desire. And we'll see the way in which it all unfolds, where we have obligations to God and obligations to our fellow humans. So until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Hillsdale Online Courses Podcast. If you want to continue learning about the Book of Exodus or other topics, please visit hillsdale.edu/course. There you will find over 40 free online courses, including Ancient Christianity, the Genesis story, classic children's literature, and many more. The courses include additional readings, study guides, fully produced videos, and you can chat with your fellow students on a dedicated forum. Upon completing a course, you will also get a certificate. All our courses are free because we believe that a virtuous citizen is the best defense for liberty. So pursue the education necessary for freedom and happiness at hillsdale.edu/course today. That's hillsdale.edu/course. Thanks for listening.